Welcome to another River Radio Sports Central podcast, powered by our friends at NovaCare Rehabilitation. Alongside Matt Varney from 103.5 ESPN, I am Darren Kinnard, and the big story this week is the fact that we actually have some games.
Right.
The weather has finally cooperated.
Yeah, thank goodness. It was a long week last week where we didn't have anything going on, and I'm glad we're back in action.
Yeah, just a handful of games we're able to get in. Obviously, the winter storm came through, in some places worse than others. You have a lot of rural schools that didn't even go back to school till the middle of this week, or even here last couple days as we record on a Friday. And now it seems like a little normalcy is set in, and we are just on the verge of the midwinter tournaments next week, the bulk of the midwinter tournaments.
That's right. Yeah, there's Chester going on right now. The Midland Trail girls one just finished up, but most of them will be next week, and it'll be kind of after that. It'll be a dead sprint to the end of the season. So it's kind of your final, tune-up time. Tournaments are great to exposing what do you need to work on, and so a lot of teams will discover kind of the final things they need to work on, or say, hey, yeah, we've known this. We still need to keep on improving on this. And then it'll be maybe a week of try to figure that out, and then it's a dead sprint for the final 3 weeks of the season. So it end of the season's almost already here.
Yeah, Woodlawn won the Midland Trail Girls Conference Tournament for the 6th straight year. Just a dominant run for them. They beat Sandoval Odin Patoka in the title game 58-33. It's going to be Chester and Sparta in the championship game at Chester Saturday night. And so Sparta going to play tournaments in back-to-back weeks as they host one of the midwinters next week.
That's right, and it's a pretty darn good one as well. Been talking with people about it a whole bunch since Murfreesboro's in it. I've been looking at it plenty. Murfreesboro and Pinckneyville are in it, of course. Sparta, of course, who's been very good this year. They stumbled at the DuQuoin championship game, but right before we were started recording, we were talking about that game, and just I feel like that was much more a stub your toe type of game than this is the reality when you have Murfreesboro and Sparta matchup. I guess we'll find out because they play 8:30 Friday next week. But aside from that, Freeburg, who's a little bit down this year, but they're always good in that tournament. It's a very good tournament. A year ago, it was looked at, I think, as one of the weaker midwinters, and then all of a sudden Pinckneyville gets added, and it's like, well, hold on a minute, boys and girls. This is a pretty darn good tournament.
And so what's interesting is, and I'm a bracket guy, and I make no apologies. I want to see a bracket.
I understand that.
And the idea is with these 8-team tournaments that they go pool play, you get that extra game. You've got your 3 pool games, and then that Saturday will be all the trophy games. And that's the way Sparta's set up. The Benton Invitational for years was a 6-team tournament, and there was just a round robin. You played 5 games. And now being an 8-team field, they've gone bracket, so it's just 3 games. And there's just several tournaments. And it also kind of falls into what we've talked about a lot away from the camera is there's just so many tournaments that, you've got some with 5 teams, some with 4 teams. And, and it's just like, I would, if I was the czar, I would kind of, hey, let's kind of combine these. And look, if you've got 4 teams and you've got 4 teams, you can do your pools.
Right.
And then we'll get together and play on Saturday and have a championship.
Tournament fatigue is a real thing, especially among media members, and there's just so many, as you said, and there's got to be a way. But I also understand every school wants to have. There's generally 3 tournaments every single year. Every team wants to have one of those at least. So I get it, but at the same time, there's so much. It's tough to keep track. Sometimes there's a tournament one year and then it disappears the next year, and then a couple years later it resurfaces.
Right.
So. It's tough, but nonetheless, this is great opportunity for the teams involved in it.
And lots of hospitality rooms, but that's another topic. The other part that's is interesting to me is that we think of the holiday tournament week being so crazy.
Yeah.
I would argue midwinter tournament is worse in that craziness category, just because all of the games are during the week and during school, other than the Saturday trophy games. So unlike the holiday tournaments where you can play at 9 a.m. And you got games all day, there's more tournaments and they're spread out the entire week.
Yeah, I completely agree. You wake up doing a sports cast at 6 a.m. and you look and say, what happened? And you're like, oh my God, look at all these tournaments. It's very stressful, again,
Right.
from a media standpoint. But, I mean, that's part of the job. You sign up
Right.
for that part. But it is very much you look at it and you just get bug-eyed because you're like, oh, my gosh, I didn't realize there was this many tournaments. And it's very much we got to get all these in as quickly as possible. And unfortunately, this is also the time when weather likes to try to spoil things a little bit. Luckily, for a couple years now, we haven't seen anything like that really happen to the midwinters. But this is the time, I think, when a lot of people fear the weather the most.
Right. And to that extent, at least to this point, it looks just going to be bitterly cold.
Yes.
And look, that's a great time to be in a warm gym.
Oh, without a doubt. And for us media folks, full bellies as well from the fantastic hospitality room.
Yes, no question about that. It's interesting in the midwinter tournaments. You still have a couple that do conference tournaments. We mentioned the Midland Trail girls. Midland Trail boys is this week next week
Right.
at Weber. Waltonville, of course, the top seed. And so you see that still a little bit in the smaller schools. The GEC tournament will be the following week. They go the week after the midwinter tournaments. And so you still see those situations where you've got very familiar conference foes going head to head.
I honestly kind of prefer those. They're a lot more fun. Now, I think that they should happen after all the conference action has concluded. You
Right.
can seed it that way pretty nicely. And you might know what's going to happen, but at the same time, it's a lot of fun, and tournament atmosphere is different than every night it's a different opponent. Tournament atmosphere is fun. You can have a regular season champ. It's just like college. Regular season champ, and then also a tournament champ, except everyone's going to the
Right.
postseason in this situation.
And the other interesting thing about next week and midwinter tournament week is, yes, there are tournament titles on the line and that, but this is the last real exposure, so to speak, to make your case for the postseason seeding.
Right, exactly, because they're right around the corner as well, and tournaments are a great place for people that are kind of deciding those things. A chance to see multiple teams all at once and get an idea of where they think that they should be at. And so it's the last chance that some people that are voting on those items might see your team. And so it's a great chance to leave a mark and an impression. And, you never know exactly. It could be truly the difference between being seeded for one team, 3 or 4, in terms of where they're going to end up.
Right. And I think that by and large, maybe with just a couple of exceptions, I think we have a really good idea who's going to be the top seeds.
I think so, for the most part.
But I think where this comes into play is who's going to be 2, 3, and 4, and 5, and again, where that matches up is the way the subsectionals are set up. 1 and 4 are going to be together, so you're 2 and 3, and you look at 1A, you figure, okay, well, Waltonville's going to be, a 1 on one side, and you've got Goreville and Meridian on the other side, and who's going to be what, because maybe if you're 1. If you're also a 1, if you get to the sectional, you're not going to see Waltonville until the championship,
Correct.
And so there's just a lot of factors that, a lot of moving parts that this is, and next, 8-10 days are going to be really important when it comes to seeding and how the postseason's going to look.
And as you go further down the subsectional bracket as well, it can affect if you get a bye or not as well. And a lot of those teams don't mind playing that quarterfinal matchup. That's going to happen on that Monday of regional play in the final week of February. But a lot of teams will tell you, we want that bye, so we get the extra day. We get to scout a little bit. We get the rest because you're at the end of a marathon at that point. So you'll take that extra day if you can and prepare a little bit better for a Wednesday game in the semifinals. So that could be the difference between life and death for some of these teams.
And I will say this, and we'll get more into it as the seeding comes out, but the subsectional of death in 2A,
oh my gosh,
you're talking about, you've got Althoff, Central, Pinckneyville, Carlisle, Westland, Columbia, Nashville, Mater Dei. You're talking about 8 teams that are legit.
Mm-hmm.
I mean, and so now how is that seeding going to fall? Because the only seeding that's protected is 1 and 4 and 2 and 3 if it doesn't involve the host teams.
Right. And
then they send everybody else according to travel, which, again, we'll get my bracket ran in the coming weeks. But again, it matters because that suddenly that regional semifinal game on that Wednesday is a tussle.
Oh, without a doubt. And I mean, the quarterfinals on that Monday, you mentioned 8 teams right there. 1 or 2 of them may not be in the semifinals on Wednesday.
Right. And the other 3 are Sparta, DuQuoin, and Redbud, who have all had their moments too. So there's no gimmies there. But again, that it just shows you, who's going to end up in that top 4. Carlisle hosting makes a difference, and so if they're, say, Carlisle's a 5, well, then, it changes where it all goes. So it's going to be fascinating to watch it play out. But again, this is that last audition, so to speak, for the seeding.
Yeah, which the coaches will definitely, especially in that subsectional specifically, they will impress upon their players of, hey, if you want a good seed, this is the time to show out, and we need to pick up a couple good wins.
Right.
And we might need a little bit of help outside of our action, but with that help doesn't matter if you don't put together good performances here.
Right. And the same thing goes on the girls' side. There's not as many girls tournaments in the midwinter, but there are a couple and pretty good, especially at Highland, where it's just an absolutely loaded field. And again, there's the same kind of log jam in that same subsectional in 2A, where you've got Bree Central, who's number 1 in the state. You got Nashville, who's top 5. You got Carlisle, Mater Dei, and the list. And who's going to be paired with whom is going to be a big deal. And look, Nashville last night. Again, we're recording on Friday. Last night, just absolutely torched a very good Marion team, beat them 60-23, and so this is going to be a team that finished second last year, and certainly has that aspirations. But again, you look at how difficult the sectional complex is. It's going to be a chore just to get out.
Right, exactly. Well, and you mentioned that Nashville Marion game. I saw that, and that popped my eyes right out of my skull because Marion has been, obviously, first-year head coach with Eric Griffin. He's still establishing everything he wants in year 1, but they have been very good.
Right.
The things that have really impressed me about them is that they saw Harrisburg twice and beat them twice. And Harrisburg has been rolling all season long. And when they saw Harrisburg earlier in the season, they were rolling even faster at that point in time. So to go ahead and take a loss to Nashville by 32 points. That was one that I was like, okay, the Hornets are real.
Yeah, it was 36-7 at half, and I was just like, holy cow. But again, so we're not that far away from the postseason seeding in basketball. Actually, the postseason for the winter sports starts Saturday with the bowling regionals, and Heron Bowl is hosting one. Salem is also hosting, and so when you look at and bowling's unique in the fact that it's a single class, and so it doesn't matter if you're Collinsville or if you're Weber Township, you're in the same boat. And so when you look at some of the best bowling teams in the state, 6 of the top 10 in the boys' side are here, and so. When you look at the way things go, to have 2 regionals like that at Salem and then at Heron, you're going to get quite a few teams to the sectional, quite a few local teams.
Yeah, it's kind of like bass fishing, where for some reason Southern Illinois is just more dominant in those sports than in other sports. Don't know why the Chicagoland area isn't producing bowlers left and right, but because perfect place for it. There's a lot of people up there. You would think there'd be quite a few, but Southern Illinois is going to take that feather and put it in their cap without a doubt. And I wouldn't be surprised if in a couple of weeks we're talking about some local names that, if you haven't heard them, you will have at that point, and be competing for a state championship one way or another. Yeah,
Salem's the defending champion. Last year, they had to rally late to beat Harrisburg for the finals, so that was a 1-2 finish. And in both teams, Harrisburg especially is loaded up again. They've been ranked number 1 at a lot of times. So bowling postseason starts Saturday. We're winding down with basketball, wrestling regionals. Just around the corner. That'll be, I believe that's the 8th. Is that Saturday? That'll be the regionals, the sectionals the following week, and the state. And so, even though the winter's a weird season.
It is.
It feels like it's so long, but yet, all of a sudden it's like, all of a sudden we're here to the postseason.
Yeah, exactly. It goes by in a blink of an eye. Every year, I hate the whole analogy of as you get older, time moves quicker, which it does.
It does.
There's a science behind it and everything, but especially for winter season, every year goes by and you're just like, wait, it just went right by. You start in late November, early December, and then after that first month, really, when you get into January, you're like, whoa, this all of a sudden just got real quick. The first month moves by at a decent pace, and then you get into January, and you're like, what do you mean we're almost done, even though you got 2/3 of the season left technically?
Right. So we'll shift gears a little bit. Let's talk about maybe little warmer sports. News out of the IHSA this week that they are going to change the way the postseason format for softball and baseball, and the way it's currently constructed. 1A and 2A play 1 week, and then 3A and 4A play 1 week. And so that baseball and softball run concurrently. They're switching that up starting in 26. It's going to be the 4 softball are all going to end up on the same weekend. The following week, the 4 baseball are going to all end up on the same weekend, and it makes it more consistent with the way the IHSA does the other classes. Like when they made the change with basketball, they've made the changes in soccer and some of the other sports like that to get, the sport is going to end on this day. Right,
exactly, and that was the biggest takeaway for me when I saw it. I thought it was the right move, and just that everything else has been going that way, and so everybody should be finishing on the same time. Everybody should be celebrating at the same time. It's weird to have one weekend there be a bunch of celebrations, and then the next weekend it's, oh yeah, and this also happened, especially when you have schools in the area that are in kind of split up in that as well, because then it messes up the whole postseason as well. Someone starts the postseason 1 week, and then for that week, the bigger schools in the area are scrambling to find somebody to play, but they really are only going to find ones that they're going to find in their regionals. Right. So it helps set things up so much more smoother for the entire sport.
Well, from a selfish perspective, from the media perspective, I am all in on this because I think it's great, and we can do that because one, we don't have any 4A teams in this immediate that we cover, and the 3A teams. There's fewer, right? And and again, there hasn't been a ton of success getting to state for the 3A teams, right? And so when you start thinking about, the way it has been, Memorial Day for super sectionals, you've got 1A and 2A playing baseball and softball, and you think about all the teams in our region, and it's impossible to get what all covered. And so now, yes, you are adding the 3A super sectional to the same day as the 1A, 2A, but there's only going to be 3 games that we would have to worry about on that particular day. And the fact that, that championship Saturday, so to speak, I remember we had 4 teams a couple of times, 1A, 2A baseball and softball make it to state. That's right. And even though both the championships are in Peoria, what a nightmare that was to try to cover because you're trying to get to this game, and you just can't be everywhere at once. And so again, from a selfish perspective, I am all in on this. Right. I am all in on it.
Well, and the people will agree with you, maybe not immediately, but they'll agree with you because that will allow the kids to get more of a spotlight as well. From a media standpoint. So yeah, it's great in that aspect as well because it will bring a lot more spotlight, and your media folks won't be having to scramble around and whatnot. Right. Back to Chicago, they've got all the media folks they need, but in Southern Illinois, it's not the same case, and a lot of times it's 1-2 man crews trying to scramble and get to all the places all at once, and so this will definitely help bring a spotlight to all of our area kids.
Now, as constructed, the current contract for softball at the Louisville Slugger Complex in Peoria, this is the final year for it, but all indications from the IHSA release, they expect to stay there because that facility is tremendous. Number one, it has multiple fields and it has 2 championship fields, and they're all turf. Right. And so if you do have weather be an issue, you're able to get games, and that's not going to be a problem. Now, baseball is a little different. 1A and 2A are at Dozer Park in Peoria. 3A and 4A are in Joliet at the Slammers home. And so those contracts are staggered for some reason. The 1A is through 25, 2A, and then the Joliet contract goes through 26, and they said they were going to honor that and then make a decision for 27. My gut tells me they're better off to leave them split because baseball's different.
Sure.
You know, and just when you think about weather and facilities, I mean, Dozer Park's grass.
Mm-hmm. Yeah.
And you're not on a turf field. I think, again, the other part being travel, why 3A and 4A is in Joliet.
Sure.
So I would not be surprised to see those stay split, and I think that's probably a good idea.
It's not an awful idea. I could understand both sides, but the more I listen to you talk about it, the more I'm on your side about it. And just that, I don't necessarily, because, when we look at like football and stuff, okay, yeah, you have your 8As and your 7As and stuff, and, not a lot of Southern Illinois teams will make it to the state finals in that regard, but it's also not fair to ask them to go and travel but at the same time, when you look at just how everything is laid out and whatnot, it does make a lot more sense for the 3As and the 4As. There's a lot more in Central and Northern compared to what Southern Illinois is, and that's a little unfair for, like, say, a Heron or something like that to have to make that trip if they were to make it that far. But when you just look at the majority of teams, it's not the same way as, like, with football where you're broken up by 8 classes, and it's a lot easier to make those arguments one way or another.
Yeah, historically, the baseball state final, I mean, it used to be played at Lanphier Park in Springfield, and then they had it in Joliet, and I think before that it was maybe Kankakee. Mm-hmm. And it's just, I think Pinckneyville one year made it to state, and it was not in Springfield or Peoria. It was in Joliet or Kankakee, and so but you know what, if you're 3A and you get there, mm-hmm. you'll deal with that problem. You'll exactly. absolutely deal with that problem.
And I mean, the one thing I will say is slowly we are seeing more 3A schools in the area. As more population comes into the area, we'll see maybe some more 3A schools develop. Heck, maybe one day we could be even talking about a 4A school in the area. That's far in the distance, but if more population comes into Southern Illinois, which we're starting to see, that is a possibility in the far-off future, and then maybe we can have those conversations of more centralizing those state finals to maybe more of a Peoria-type area. And
the only other place that comes to mind that could play, and you would be familiar with it, would be Bloomington. Absolutely. And the fact that ISU's field, and then you've got the Corn Crib also, Absolutely. Right? I mean, because those are two separate facilities, and so you potentially could do that and have that.
Not too far apart either.
Right,
the thing,
and so if the IHSA wanted to host everything in one place, Bloomington's not a terrible trip. For the folks that are in the northern part of the state.
I wouldn't disagree with that one bit. And back to, once we have more 3A and 4A schools in this area and from the football side of things, more, 5, 6, 8 type schools, we can have those conversations of having more rotating type of sites as well. I'd love to see all state final sites eventually start to rotate where all areas of the state get to be highlighted in all the sports. But
I think that's a pipe dream.
I know it's a pipe dream, but I'd like to see it one day happen.
Right.
But until Southern Illinois is able to get the population to make that argument, we're not going to see it.
Right. And, we had the girls golf down here for a few years, and it was well received. People raved about how it was run, but at the end of the day, they wanted a more central location. Yes. And I get it. Absolutely. Yeah. And at that point, there weren't nearly as many hotels as there are now in the area. So it'll be interesting, but I still think they will keep it centralized as much as possible.
In my pipe dream, though, the centralization wouldn't be as big of an issue because it would be rotating every single year.
Right.
But again, that's far off in the future. But let's hope one day
we can dream, Maddie.
We can dream, and maybe in our lifetime we could potentially see it. But that means get your friends to Southern Illinois, folks.
Well, that's going to do it for this edition of the River Radio Sports Central podcast, powered by our friends at NovaCare Rehabilitation. For Maddie V, I'm Darren Kinnard. We're back next week. Have a great weekend, everyone, and we'll see you then.